Hey guys, this is part 2 of a multi-part series that I had decided to start doing. Here are the links not only to part 1, but also to an earlier review that inspired me to try this all out. If you want to check those out first, they're there for the picking, but if you want to just jump right into this one, be my guest.
The team go to get the 5 keys, but of course one is missing.
But they realize that they don't have time to search for the last key as they have to protect the planet and find Pidge. The team blasts off and loads into the Voltron lines in order to attack the drill force. Now, of course, the main character here, Keith, is going to be the one who will have the most unique line for the rest of the show. That's kind of the seat by the window of mecha shows. And yet, in this sequence, he is forced to use one of the regular lions just to take part in the fight. I guess it doesn't matter in the long run, but it pushes against the theme we expect to find here of each one being destined for their specific fighter. I don't see a whole lot of mecha shows wherein it doesn't matter who uses what vessel and they just swap them around randomly. I now understand why they decided to have one of them run off, so that they could do this key plotline without having one just standing around while the rest take part in the fight. But clearly if you had had Keith be the one who ran off, it would have been much better with the dynamic that the show is trying to push forwards. Nitpicky, I know, but I'm just trying to reconcile as much of this as possible. As the lines launch off, Pidge is backed into a corner by a militia of Drool soldiers. The Drools nearly crush him to death, but he is saved at the last minute by the cave dwellers we saw earlier. The lions show up just after this and really start causing some serious damage. These things really are just unstoppable, throwing down tanks, ships, whole sections of the forces in mere moments. Pidge sees this from the cave and realizes that this must be the Voltron force, and that they must be piloted by his friends. He runs to join them, but the cave dwellers are all like,
"That's not a great plan."
Just as the lions are about to attack the main ship, it blasts off and leaves behind a very kinky road beast. I'm kinda guessing that these monsters seen throughout the show are only mechanical in the English dub. The old, it's okay if they're robots Saturday morning code. It's kinda odd the way they bring it up though, because it's sort of constantly contradicted if these things were made by the generals with science or Hagar with magic. I'm not sure if this is an odd dubbing choice or something that I should view as an interesting theme of the show. Similarly, the Voltron mecha is also shown to have some mythical properties to it, even though it clearly is a giant mecha. If it hasn't been clear, I'm doing these videos as I go along, and I'm not exactly fact-checking my hunches on the show because I want to see how my views change over time without outside spoilers or interference. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because I have a hypothesis that I might be able to guess what they changed just by looking at the animation itself. If I get some things wrong about Voltron or GoLion, forgive me, I'll catch on eventually. The team tries to tackle the beast head-on, but without the full might of the entire Voltron mechanism, they are easily knocked down for the count, left for dead in the show's honest-to-God first gripping cliffhanger. Meanwhile, Pidge is being led down a cave by one of the remaining Erusians, a term that I did not make up just now, where an entrance to the castle is apparently hidden away. For some reason, the large, bearded man leading him there sounds like this.
"It's only a little bit further to the castle, small one."
Would this be a good time to talk about the dubbing of this special and how weird it is? I'm not exactly talking about the voices. They're a little crunchy at times, but overall they do not represent a systemic problem. The real issue at hand is the often crass and bemusing writing. They can often make a simple scene outright indigestible. I actually get a feel here that the dialogue stems into two main branches. Those that were adapted least loosely from the original, and those that were created entirely for this show to fit the new take on the universe. A whole lot of the lines that are translated are done so in a sense that I can kinda tell what they're supposed to be saying, but it's just not coming through at its full possible capacity.
Hi! Got a cheese sandwich?
There are also a lot of scenes where I can easily tell that the dialogue which is being acted out doesn't necessarily match the emotions which are being portrayed on the faces of these characters. As if the driving force behind what these characters were feeling is missing.
Let's try and sneak out while the roe beast is busy eating his lunch.
Now with individual lines, this makes it so that it's all kinda hokey and oddly matched. But then when you try and stitch all these lines together, it feels as loose and kerfuffled as you would imagine. A lot of scenes with dialogue don't feel like the characters are really talking to each other. Rather, it's more like each character individually is yelling out random phrases that happen to kinda match the situation that they're in.
We don't have much time. Let's think of something.
We've got to move, now!
We'll never make it.
This leaves me with the impression that in the Japanese versions of these episodes, the characters are a lot more defined and divergent in terms of at least what their central gimmicks are. Of course, there is one more obvious issue that we have to bring up that is something that we are not going to be able to avoid. Censoring of situations and dialogue. Here's a simple example in the very next scene. Pidge returns to the command center and learns that the other lines have not returned yet. He then has a mental breakdown and starts crying like a child throwing a tantrum. The clear suggestion here is that in the Japanese version it was stated that they were likely dead, and Pidge was acting this way because he doesn't want to believe that. But without that motivation, this scene feels very disjointed, as if nothing actually fits together how it's supposed to. If even the slightest suggestion that the team might have died in battle is so awkwardly chopped off like that, I can only imagine how much of a riot it's going to be when the show gets to serious storylines that I know the Japanese version so swiftly approaches. Here's another classic example of hilarious censorship that I kinda glossed over before. The scene where the team lands on a field of stripped bones and fallen skulls. Obviously, this was not going to be something that the American team was going to be able to cut. But they also obviously couldn't have the characters acknowledging the dark nature of this scene. So the English voices coming out of the various members of the group steer clear of the topic, while the animation clearly does not.
Quit looking at me!
Well, don't look at me!
I hate to think of what this place means.
You know, there's something about this place really puts me on edge. But I just can't put my finger on it. Most 80s adaptations of anime did this sort of thing a lot, doing a pretty patchy job of trying to hide intelligent and dark themes by quickly pushing them under the rug. Most of these are annoying, but also honestly funny. In fact, believe it or not, I think I would argue that there are a lot funnier and a lot worse examples from other shows on around the same time.
I'm not programmed to understand human emotions, but something deep down in my vertical integrator tells me that Diane and Oren are still together. Zoltar may have transformed their bodies into metal, but their spirits will always be united. Love is something so strong, it defeats evil every time.
My infraprobe scanners monitored the flight of that comet, and it was actually carrying Diane and Oren.
Wonderful!
So Pidge realizes that the team is okay after he hears Hunk snoring on the intercom, as he is able to wake the whole team up and they return to the base. Once again, I kind of feel like they're only having the rest of the team return so that they'll all be in the right lines when the first transformation scene takes place, but whatever. The team does some basic hunting around the tomb to see if they can find any clues of where the keys have ended up, and one of them discovers that there are holes buried all around the room. Pidge, of course, quickly deduces that this is his friends, the
Space mice!
The team manages to capture a few of the creatures in a cage, but just before they are caught by Allura, who orders them to release the mice as she recalls how they would be kind to her when she was a child. This is the greatest show ever. Of course, the mice have the key and they give it back. With this, the team is able to activate all 5 lions, who form the mighty robot Voltron just as the Robeast finally awakens again. And the team has to again defend the planet. And in this setting, finally seeing the Voltron force in action and seeing the team work together at long last, I finally think that I truly understand what people see in this show, what makes it so popular, and what really hits people in their core. It's Power Rangers. Episode opens with the team doing something ordinary, unconnected to the villains. The villains plan a way to defeat them despite previous failures. They send down an initial threat, which the team is able to defeat using ordinary combat. Villains then send down a much bigger threat. The team has to form their giant robot, made up of smaller robots, to stand a chance against this giant, and it explodes after they slash it with their sword. Power Rangers. When I rewatch the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, I can't help but feel like it's a little shoddy and that it isn't something that's aged well. But I also feel like it has a lot of epic things going on in it. And even though I know the show is flawed, I still enjoy watching it today. It has a strong heart, cares about its output, and it isn't a bore to sit through. If it isn't obvious, I think that all these qualities are present within at least the first few episodes of Voltron as well. Most notably, in both cases, I can very easily see someone taking the original stories and concepts and working to update them in a way that makes them work in a larger capacity. Being a Sentai-inspired show that happens to also be animated might actually work in Voltron's favor. When I was a child, I was always extremely annoyed that the show rarely used the individual Zords outside of the transformation sequence. I always thought that the Mighty Morphin dinosaurs were way cooler and far more interesting than the final, samey-looking mashup. What is the point of having a robot made up of smaller robots if the other pieces are never used on their own? As an adult, I realized that this clearly was a budgetary issue, as it was easy to make one giant robot costume, but difficult to make each and every one of the Zords in the same fashion. So Voltron has the clear advantage that they can do things like this, and it won't be any more expensive than animating the robot in its final form. However, unlike in Mighty Morphin, where each Zord is different and could make up for various attack patterns that would be intriguing to pull off, the 5 lions are all kinda the same, but with different colors. I also was under the impression initially that the show being animated would allow for the Zords to look more like giant robots and less like a dude in a clunky costume, but I think it presents itself with a new problem on that front entirely. Guys, I'm sorry. I know that this is gonna make a ton of people mad, but in this show, Voltron never looks like a beast or a robot or anything like that. It looks like a cheap dollar store action figure. When I see the arms go together like that, I don't see a Megazord forming. I see a peg on one figure that goes into the main one. When the Black Lion's mouth opens and the head plops down, I see the cheap faceplate that pops in place when you open the head. And the entire thing just looks so still and lifeless. When they try to make it move around and stretch its limbs in ways that I know it can't do, it just makes it look like the whole thing is made out of Jello. I can't imagine this thing getting its awkward Lego hands even slightly close to each other, or even being able to hold the sword right. Look at the animation that plays when the robot is finally formed. Doesn't it look like it doesn't belong in a fight scene? Every time I see this, I keep expecting a commercial break to start, or the freaking name of your local toy shop to pop up. And this plays every episode. This is one of the consistent animation points that they use every single time. It's very bad. So they slash the beast, it glows for a second, and then it explodes. And after that, episode 4 of Voltron suddenly just